Good morning, traders, and a very happy Wednesday out there to you all, pre-Thanksgiving action. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there last night, and are all ready for this day in front of us here. We do have a nice little 8:30 data point to consider here this morning. That's going to be our unemployment claims and durable goods due out for the U.S. there. And then at 10 o'clock Eastern, we'll have our consumer sentiment to take into account there as well, top of those first 30 minutes. And then lastly, including the extra gyrations we've been getting in the crude early this morning, we'll also have that crude oil figure due out at 10:30 Eastern there. So, with that said, we want to jump into these charts so we can cover the bases here just before we get ourselves going into our morning session and before we get into all of our morning economic data points. So, with that said, we're going to take our daily chart here of the S&P and blow it up here just a notch. And what we'll want to note here is that we had the inside range day from yesterday's action, as we well know. And we could see even overnight during our Globex session, we also have an inside range bar. So we had an inside range bar in the 24-hour session yesterday. And so far, an inside range in the Globex with 45.6350 as the Globex high and 45.43 as the Globex low. So not too shabby of a Globex range. Outside of that, we are working, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yesterday was day 8, so 8 closes on the 5 SMA here for the S&P. So we do have a bit of that extended run feeling starting to take place once again. So we have that going for us. This needs to be up here at 66. And we know yesterday we did probe above. We traded above that 45.66. We ended up trading up to 45.71. So top of this previous congestion zone, we had two little data points back to back in that vicinity, so we were able to look above it and then kind of proceeded to consolidate thereafter. But that's where we stand, more or less on the daily charts. 5 SMA down below comes in at 45.44, as we've been kind of carrying that forward each day, just in case we do at some stage see a test beneath that point, but hasn't been the case as of yet. As we come down to the hourly time frames here, obviously we know we left all that low developed areas held fairly well, and we had our little second wind and have been maintaining. So really what we're coming in with is a bit of an hourly flag, and we'll keep an eye. They're working on a bit of a retest, but like we said, we still have an inside range in the Globex session, in which case 45.66 should still be of good value because we did test above it yesterday and came off of it fairly quickly. So viewing that as a little bit of a zone there of interest for the S&Ps, and then down below, very close to that 5 SMA once again, we have 45.41 and a quarter. It's kind of being a little bit of the caution zone there on that hourly chart for those S&Ps. So not half bad. We have, decent rhythm going on there. Over on the DAX side of the equation, still working with its extended run to the upside as well. We did have the 3-bar overlap yesterday on the close, and so far we've been working on trading low to high out of this balancing act. So DAX just continuing to, move its way there on the extended run. We haven't, come up to any major tests or data points. Those would come in a little bit further up, and this is the December contract, so as we start to get back a little bit further in time, this wasn't quite front month back at these little data points, but either way, 16.063, 16.153 there would be little zones up above, and in case we have any type of adverse reaction there, this would be another case where 15.968 would bring us that 5 SMA down below. But clearly, for now, they're doing a fairly good job of keeping themselves maintained. So not too much to fault there on the side of that of the DAX, getting more so of the range expansion up out of the 3-bar balance mode. So fairly impressive on that group there. And what we can almost note immediately here for something like the euro currency and the currency spectrum is they did have a little better test beneath previous day's low, a better swing in the overnight session, if you would. So our Globex low in this euro currency, 1.08950. So some plays around, with the big round number there of 1.09. He ducked below it briefly overnight and proceeded to prop it back up. What you might see is little gyrations. We might try and trade a little bit on both sides of the previous day's low, 1.09115, but that's where we are on the dailies. This intraday chart, we actually have decent rhythm. What I want to bring the attention to is the configuration on the oscillator here, giving us that kind of two-part wave or a little loss of momentum after. Recall from yesterday, we were talking about the three pushes up, the 1, 2, 3, and we did indeed resolve this as an A, B, C type of rhythm. You could see that in the oscillator. So nice to see the euro currency, come to fruition to some degree there. On the hourly charts, you're going to get the same feeling, a little loss of momentum. We've already come up and touched that hourly moving average, so it might just give us a little room to rotate, in which case that previous day's low would be a good, spot for us to see if we can keep ourselves maintained above it. And as more of a bit of an intermediate zone here, I don't want to get the charts too cluttered, but could watch 1.09345 just because that's the start of our kind of low developed zone there from yesterday's action, but not too shabby there on the euro currency. The ABC down on that 120-minute after, kind of giving those three pushes up feeling. And they did some nice defending on their test below that 5 SMA there during the overnight session. So nice and interesting there on that euro currency. And then we have the gold also putting in a fairly good attempt here. The GC's been really putting in some work here on the daily charts. We had a good range expansion bar up yesterday, right? So we had that the previous day's high marked off from our little evening review, or post close review there, and we can see we haven't traded there yet. That's 2009.8, so we have an inside range bar in the gold from overnight, but would be certainly viewing that zone as a point of interest since we did get good range expansion up out of the 3 bar. However, this 120-minute data kind of gives us some nice technicals here. For one, as we know from before, we had that failure test, so it kind of gave us that U-turn feeling, right? And then we had our singular reaction high, which we came awfully close to testing yesterday. And just want to point out that this configuration here, where we failed to make the full retest up and then started to pick up steam, a little variation on the theme. We're working on it here. So if we fail to make the full test up, that would, bring us a little note of caution. But we still have room to go there. So we'll let them run their courses first, see as to how they handle any test further towards that previous day's high. And then if they start to taper off or start to lose a little bit of momentum, we kind of view that as a little bit of, caution there. So in which case 1997 is really the level where things would start to, shift a little bit more there for the gold. So basically between 1997, little caution zone there, and then that 2011.9 up above, just a little bit above that previous day's high, will be some real nice levels to bear in mind there for that of the GC. But interestingly, so far they were just left as an inside range bar from the Globex session, but hanging out around that 2000 handle there, so give them some credit there for that. And then moving on along, we have the crude here. As we mentioned earlier there, the crude was pretty quick to get some better range expansion there. I do believe I saw a couple of your guys' mentions there, little OPEC jitters and such, little delays, uncertainty and such there. So obviously the crude taking that to heart. We do have the EIA data, the crude number today, so that'll add extra excitement. So with the crude, we did proceed to get range expansion down through the 5 SMA overnight. We have the inside range bar. So of course, as far as the dailies go, we start to note the fact that we're taking out the 74.92 again, which was very important to recall when we were coming back up above that zone. That 74.92 was a good point of interest. And then, of course, the absolute low, way down there, that's at 72.37. So, in the daily charts, that's kind of what we have going on there. But on the 120, gives us a nice feeling, right? So, kind of failed, right, to make the full test up. This was kind of our caution zone, 76.92 from the close yesterday, so failed to really, materialize too much. And what we're doing once again here is we had sharp down through that area, sharp up through it again, and now we're coming in to polish off some more work in there. It kind of held up at 74 even, but we could view this also as kind of being inside pocket zone. Didn't quite get all the way down there, but pretty well defined area because we did have a lot of activity moving to the downside, firmed up a notch, and then had some nice activity going back to the upside. So that kind of V type of shaped, movement that we had in the crude. So as we come back down, that's going to be a little zone of interest. And of course, they've already had a pretty large excursion overnight, so they might try and do a little bit of back and fill, do some digesting in the U.S. morning. But if that's not the case, we have our visible lows there marked off in advance for us. So that's there with the crude. And then, like you said, EIA could shake things up a little bit. We have our unemployment claims here in a couple minutes, and then we have that 10 o'clock figure. So, a couple things in the queue to be aware of. But last but not least here, before we get to that May 30 data point, is going to be that of the bonds here. And what we'll want to take into account with these bonds is that we're starting to work ourselves a little closer towards that pit session gap area basis the yields, right? So if I pull this over to the TYX.X on the trade station here, we'll note that we're maneuvering ourselves closer here. So we had 4.6. We kind of filled in this first one here from the 22nd to the 25th. So we've been putting in some work there. But any further up in the bonds, which is inverse the yield, for one, you got the big round number of 4.5. That's a very substantial zone. We left the 4.6. And you can see we got a pretty sizable gap. It's from basically the 20th of Sep up to the 21st there. So that's nice and substantial. That's a good point of interest to bear in mind. And then also, I can bring to mention here, very similar feeling here on the 10-year interest rates here. Check it out. They're actually opening essentially at the gap fill point, 4.365 here in the case of the 10 years. This is a space from Sep 20th to Sep 21st there, and this is where we just opened here at this little data point here. So we opened basically at the gap fill there, which also lets us know that the 10 years are working on the tail area from last week. So they're giving that a little bit of a test, and we'll see as to how they hold it. But essentially, for the most part, we're already getting the gap fill during the overnight session. So 109.08 half is the high from last week, and the 10s, the bonds, as we well know, have already taken it out there. So bonds are just continuing to march. As far as the futures go, the yields kind of present us a little bit more of a clean image there because it shows the gap and everything. But in the bonds, we could just note you got 117.03. This whole little area where we put in a pause bar of green whilst we were on this extended run to the downside. But you can get that general feel. Once again, these are the notes inside the gap area there. The bonds, also trading near it. 4.5 would be their equivalent spot. So take that into account, and with that said, we'll dial it back here, let this morning unemployment claims data get out of the way, and see what we got lining up for ourselves here in this early morning session. So that'll be due out in just a little over 2 minutes, and then we will be on our merry way here for this morning session.